Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Rainbow International podcast. And today we have Linda Stewart, OBE, who is the company director alongside Alan Stewart. Slightly different for me today in that a lot of Alan's origin story I've grown up with because I was part of his team in Buchanan Street, whereas Linda, initially being in 15 Royal Exchange Square, where I trained once a week, was not as integral a part in my kind of growing up. But once I was an art team member, once I was a stylist, manager, and then on to being a salon owner, Linda has been right by my side, behind my back, and making sure that I've been doing what I'm meant to do, and the fellow directors. So it's going to be really interesting for me to find out her origins in hairdressing and then into the business with Rainbow International as well. So hope you enjoy. Okay, so hello Linda.
Hi, Ricardo.
How you doing? Now, obviously, you'll have heard what Alan went through in the nearly 6 hours that we talked to him, so I'll hopefully make it a wee bit less painful than what I put Alan through. And I've got an icebreaker to start to take away just the weirdness of sitting here talking about ourselves, in that you've got a chocolate choice of either Lindor or Whisper Gold, and we're going to do a winner stays on to see what everybody picks. So what's your choice?
So does this define who you are?
Well, maybe, but
Is that dark chocolate?
no, it's a milk chocolate one as well. They're both milk chocolate ones again. See, this has been the initial mistake because Alan said no dark chocolate, Ricardo. So
Oh no, I thought he likes dark chocolate.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
dark
all right.
chocolate. You've not got any.
I'll have that one.
Going to Lindor. We knew Linda was going to be a Lindor person anyway. That was completely obvious, right? It's one each. One each on the chocolate bars. Alan actually took the Whisper Gold, which was interesting. So I'll need to make sure actually I keep score. Right. So we came up with this idea of the origin story, and obviously had to start with Alan. But I think what's really important for all of the directors like myself is to make sure that your story is out there as loud and as proud as Alan's and as strong as Alan's, because for all of us inside the business know exactly where you stand in it, but I think it's going to be really important to the team members just now, future team members, and anybody in the sort of greater community and world hairdressing to know exactly where your story is. So I'm going to do the inevitable thing of going right back to the start and just kind of where you were from.
Where I was born?
Yeah.
I was born in Dunoon because my mother and all her family come from Dunoon and my dad came from Oban. So basically I was a wee girl from Argyll. So we lived there till I was about 6. And my mum and dad were both in the inland. Well, my dad was in the Inland Revenue and my mum was a teacher. So they were both like in the civil service. So Centre 1 was open, so we had to move to East Kilbride. So, which was a huge shock, coming from, it was a village outside Dunoon, and then suddenly you're in this huge metropolis, if you like, it was a brand new town, everything was brand new, and it was huge, so that was quite a culture shock.
Yeah, I
at the
bet.
time.
And so obviously, had you started school in Dunoon as well, and then had to shift in primary schools? Even that's a big change as well.
It was huge because it was a small village school, and then suddenly you're going to like a huge primary school. So I was about 7 years old.
Right. So, and at that point, so we're going to fast forward to secondary school. Where did you go to secondary school?
It was a school called Duncanrig in East Kilbride,
Right.
which had about 2,000 pupils.
Wow.
It was one of the biggest, which was just, you just got lost in it. It was...
That was actually the next thing. I mean, I went to my high school, there was probably about 300-400 people at it. And even at that, it kind of felt big from the primary school that I went to. But the idea of kind of having to be a person within 2,000 people and anybody noticing you must have been a nightmare.
No, you didn't. And I was just sort of, I was quite bright, actually, but I didn't really have to try too hard to pass exams. So, I got by under the radar, if you like. I think if you were particularly bright, they paid attention to you, or if you were particularly naughty, they paid attention to you. But everybody else in the middle seemed to just get ignored.
Yeah, I'm not telling you which camp, that needless to say, I fell into. And was this like after 11 plus and all that kind of stuff? Had that all been done and finished with by that point, or was you kind of still in about all that?
I don't know if we did an 11 plus.
No, so you're kind of that way. So had you kind of a direction at that point in school, whether it was like kind of languages or science or mathematics or anything?
I loved art.
Right.
Which is funny enough, I thought I was better than I was.
Right.
In first year, we had about, I don't know, there must have been 500 pupils in first year. And I won the art prize for the whole of first year.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't the best. You know, there was quite a few girls in the class that, you know, I had art envy. You know, I loved what they did and wished I could be at that level. I got this art prize and I was like, it's bizarre, you know, must be great. But they had all the artwork out in the hall afterwards. You know, it was all pinned up, so if you can imagine, there's hundreds. And we all had to paint this still life for our final exam for first year, which they didn't tell us that's what we were doing, you know, it was just part of the class. And it was like a really boring terracotta pot with this green plant in it. So can you imagine like 500 terracotta plants? And there was only one that was different, that stood out. And it was one with red flowers on it.
Right.
And that was mine.
That was yours. Well,
so I don't know what possessed me, because if anybody knows me, you know, I'm not a rule breaker. You know, if somebody tells me to do something, I do it exactly.
Yeah, but that's not including the creative side of your
and
brain.
Obviously,
now,
there was the creative side of my brain that just thought, you know what, this is boring.
I'm going to do it.
I'm just going to do it.
Well, it's interesting, and I won't jump ahead of the story, but obviously it was kind of meant to be, because even things that Alan talked about when there was no avenue of hairdressing in his mind at that point, little things that he was already doing were things that were going to stay with him for years going by, and we will touch on probably about 5 different things that your wee red flowers are going to show up on, without a doubt. So did you have any kind of idea what you wanted to do when you left school at that point? You kind of...
Well, I thought I wanted to go to art school, you know, that was a dream, but possibly I was never in that league anyway, you know, but if I had to do something, I loved English, I loved art, I was really good at writing stories, telling stories, and my parents, because they were sort of not made to, but you know, when they grew up, it was very much, you know, you go into like a proper job, you know, you become a teacher, or my dad's case, you know, it was like, well, you go into the Inland Revenue. They said, we don't care what you did, because my mum always felt she missed out on an opportunity, because she's very arty and craftsy, very musical.
And that's amazing for that period of time, is even
as
then,
well.
for parents to go, do you know what?
You know, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy. But in that case, I really didn't know what I wanted to do either. You know, as I say, my goal was to go to art school, and that's what I'd had in my head. But then a lot of my friends were getting jobs, Saturday jobs, and quite a few of them became hairdressers. So I'd applied. There was this job for Irvin Rusk. They were opening up in Clarkson. And everybody said, oh, that's you know, really fashionable. You know, they're very good and you should apply there. So I can remember thinking, oh, my goodness, I've got this interview now. And I was practising shampoo, because somebody said to me, they'll ask you to shampoo. And I was like, do you think? So I was practising for about a week, and all my friends, nobody had a clue what you really did to shampoo, but everybody was getting their heads shampoo. So can you imagine the disappointment when I got there, and he spent about 5 minutes talking to me and said, okay, start Saturday.
Make sure your shoes were clean. That was probably just check your shoes and your hair was clean, and that was it.
So I started, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved the whole buzz about it. I loved the camaraderie. I just loved being... I think it was because you were in amongst people, you know, and you were socialising with the clients, and it just... Everything just felt like I belonged there.
Yeah, and was that... So what's that, 15, 16?
I was 15 as a Saturday
right.
girl.
So again, that thing of it not really being a planned
No.
thing, which ironically will continually become a theme throughout all these origin stories, where it wasn't necessarily everybody's initial first port of call, but instantly knowing on that first day that kind of this was your avenue and your tribe and that you felt comfortable straight away. So at that point, was it still going to be like an apprenticeship? Were you going to need to do 3 years, or had it evolved from when Alan was doing it?
Yeah, it had evolved. Prior to that, I still didn't know if I was going to do that as a career. You know, art school was still in my mind. So I worked the whole of school summer holidays and then didn't go back for 5th year. But also when I said to my parents, you know, the first thing my dad said to me was, all right, okay, yeah. He said, that's good, you can get your own shop someday. You know, so he'd instilled that, whether he knew it or not, thinking, well, you can be a hairdresser, but obviously that would be the path you'd want to take with it. So he planted that seed from quite a young age.
And it sat there, kind of sat in the back, thinking
Yeah,
that this was always going to be an avenue.
Mm-hmm. I suppose it was always a goal, whether I knew it or not.
Yeah. So training, again, was there bits that you felt? How long did it take then?
Right, it was supposed to be about 3 years. I think I qualified in 2.5.
Right.
But there was no sort of apprenticeship. You know, it totally changed away from when Alan did it. You know, you had your apprenticeship papers and it was a proper apprenticeship. Yeah. The training, there was no theory training at all. It was just all practical. Right. You know, you trained on the job, and there was night classes.
Right, and that was
in... And there was no qualification at the end of it.
And that was in that salon, so did Irvin come in and take the classes, or was it managers and people in charge of that particular salon at the time?
Yeah, well, Alan Cameron was one of Irvin's partners.
Right.
So initially he did all the training.
Right. So you go on the floor there and kind of qualify. Was it about just building a clientele? Was the shop pretty busy initially that it was easy to build a clientele?
It was easy. You just had a clientele sitting there. Because one of the girls had gone off on maternity leave, and there was myself and a girl, Lynn, that started at the same time. And we were asked to stay behind and do a haircut, do a set, I think, and do something else. And then they said to me, right, you're on the floor Monday. So I beat Lynn.
No
so that was fine. No, but we didn't know that's what was asked of us.
Right. Wow.
And it was just because somebody was on maternity leave. So, you know, it was a 3-year apprenticeship, but they pushed me in quicker because there was a space to fill.
You were ready to rock. Mm-hmm. And the kind of type of hairdressing by that point, had it obviously, you'd say, you had to do a haircut, you had to do a set, but had it started to kind of go more into cuts and style dries?
Oh, it was
and
all cuts and style dries. It was just because of the type of clientele in Clarkson. You did need the odd client that needed their hair set, and that was a difficult thing to do. Everybody didn't want to do a set. You know, we were all taught in precision cutting.
Yeah, and that was the focus at that point. It was just kind of, you know, because it's always really interesting that kind of we're almost back to a point where we've got a really wide breadth of, you know, you need to actually be able to do a bit of everything, where again at certain points in sort of hairdressing history it's like I just want to be brilliant at that thing, and you kind of, the passion for that particular thing always sort of shows through. And then obviously throughout the legacy of the brand, it's obviously the precision cutting's always been something that we've been passionate about. How quickly, because I don't know this period of your career at all really until sort of kind of coming to the end of that period. So did you get into sort of art team stuff, art direction stuff within the brand, or was it kind of a bit of a closed shop?
It was a very closed shop.
Right.
It was, we looked at it from afar, you know, because at that time Russ were doing so much internationally, you know, in the whole hairdressing scene. And, you know, we regularly read the the Hairdresser's Journal every week, and you know there was this great magazine called Eurovision, because I know that Alan had sort of mentioned, you know, Renato Brunis, and you know he had this whole Eurovision magazine, plus he was doing all the shows, and it was great to see all the work from the light of Longaris and Robert Labetta, and you know it was real fantasy hairdressing. So we used to sit and sort of fantasize over and wonder how you do that, and try and work it out. We regularly went wherever us were doing a show. We all, you know, out our own pocket, paid money and went to see them. You know, because that again was the driver for me. You know, I just wanted to be sort of part of that world. You know, it seemed so creative, so glamorous.
And was there a reason why they didn't have a kind of structure to, like, one day you can get there, or was it just wasn't opened up to everybody?
It just wasn't opened up to it was mainly the people that worked in Hamilton that were closed, Urban and Rita. You know, there was about 2 or 3 of them, and they did all the artistic work, and it was just a closed shop.
And they didn't have a sort of showcase to bring it back to you guys. You literally had to go to
You literally
events.
had to go to events. Yeah.
Right. Again, well, that's another. You can see my eye shape changing because there's light bulb moments coming in the future. But
before I left, you know, that there was an opportunity. They did once say to all the salons, you know, we're going to produce like 10 photographs. So this is the very first time other members of the team could actually get a model, and maybe you would get a photograph. So I had my model, right, and it was a fantastic haircut, which I did by accident. It was
always the best creativity.
She'd had a perm, and it was sort of growing out, and she wanted it cut out. So when I cut it, it was doing all these mad sort of things. You know, there was bits sort of jumping off everywhere, so it looked really, really punky. And this was just at the start of the kind of punky thing. And everybody kept going, oh, that is it was so different and such an amazing look. My boss, Alan Cameron, said, yep, we'll definitely photograph that, put that forward. So I went away on holiday, and they changed the day of the shoot when I was on holiday.
Oh, you're kidding.
And some other person in the salon used my model and put their name to it. I'll never mention names.
Well, there'll be a lot of hairdressers out there probably going, that's happened to me too, that's a shocker.
So I was very disillusioned after that.
So you were with them right up until you came to Rainbow International?
Years, yeah.
So at that time, was retail a thing? Was colour as important as it kind of grew to be? What was your kind of average day in the salon like?
Colour was either capped highlights or tint regrowth, and that was it.
Yeah.
Full head tint.
And were you guys doing them, or did you have colour technicians as well?
Well, the juniors did it.
Right.
We call them assistants now, but nowadays they were juniors. We were just too busy. We were on 15-minute appointments.
Right, so it was still that back-to-back mayhem.
And eventually when we left, we were on 20-minute appointments. Right. So decided to stretch it a wee bit. But
5 minutes extra.
But you had no time to do anything yourself.
Yeah, I mean, anybody in my age group and younger that thinks of the 15-minute appointment thing you do an interview now with a stylist and they want an hour. You know, 45 minutes seems like a crazy amount of time for people.
Well, in these days, you know, you didn't do consultations. You know, the client walked in, got a gown on her before she even sat down.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, which nowadays, you know, would seem bizarre. You can't even see what the client's taste is, who she is, you know.
And was permanent still?
Permanent was
still huge. Yeah,
it was absolutely huge.
Yeah, it's
So you only got to see the client when her hair was washed.
Right, so you didn't even see it dry. They were literally in front of you, gown, wet hair. What we're doing for you today?
What you do, yeah. And also, the game was whatever the Rusk's latest haircut was, you were trying to like do versions of that because that was
Right, yeah.
that was the trendy thing.
Yeah.
So you were busy talking clients into having this.
Do you think that's disappeared a wee bit from sort of modern day hairdressing in the now haircut? You know, kind of, there's certain things that if the odd celebrity still gets a thing nowadays, then I would say that was probably more colour now than actually a haircut.
Yeah.
You know, at the time of recording, we're at the tail end of 2024, and there's been some major celebrities have big haircuts of late, and there's a couple of drama series on television just now, and there is that one short-haired pal. So we're hoping that we're just on the cusp of it all coming back. But it was a thing of, right, we've got this collection, this is how we're cutting just now, and your job is to get as many people on the street with these haircuts as possible.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. I do miss that. I miss that, even just as a perspective of the consultation, of trying to get people to take the bravery pill and go into it. I was never the most bossy person when it comes to consultations as it is. You know, it would need to be a discussion with somebody and ultimately be their idea. But the idea of that period in time and going, no, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, I do like it, but probably wouldn't have thrived in it as a hairdresser myself. So what was your total sort of period of time with?
7 years.
Right, okay. And did they have a promotion structure or anything like that, or it was just you were either a stylist or you were a manager or whatever? And did they have any kind of avenue for sort of getting to managerial work or anything like that either?
Not really. I mean, they did put a manager in charge, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a structure. You
Right.
know.
And I think interestingly as well would be what it was like for a woman at the time. You know, was there a lot of female salon owners at that period of time?
Well, Rita was,
Yeah.
because she was married to Irvin, but there was a few, but mainly, you know, everybody in Glasgow that had a name at that time were males.
Right. And then again, kind of in the position of kind of either art directors or managers and stuff like that. Was it mostly a kind of guy-led thing as well? Right, okay. And at no point, because obviously you've got this in the back of your head from your dad saying, you know, oh, you'll be able to have your own
salon.
shop one day. Was it kind of tricky to see that there wasn't actually an avenue in front of you at the time?
No, I don't think at that point that was my burning ambition. I just still felt quite young.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and you were just... I think I was trying to more sort of look at... I wanted to be more creative, you know, I wanted a more creative route.
So in that, the ambition word's a great word, and what was your ambition? So you're saying that it was to be more creative. So would that be stage work? Was it more photographic work?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it still wasn't a driving force. I was just really happy doing my clients every day, you know. But also, I always taught, you know, at night classes.
Right.
There was always two of us, and more often not, I was one of the ones of the two.
Was really doing the teaching. And did you get a buzz off of that from the sort of juniors? It feels alien for me to even say the word, but for the assistants coming through. And did you find that in that anybody that did any education in the salon, that you end up creating your own wee pack, and the kind of, you know, you never struggle for help on a busy Saturday if you're the person doing the teaching, do you?
Well, you still do all foot over. Enough help, but yeah.
So
but also I seem to naturally take on board responsibility, you know. So it'd end up people would ask me, can I do this, can I do that? And I would just naturally try and mother them or control them all. You know?
This is a running theme.
A running theme, and I've never changed.
The thing that's interesting about that is obviously you're actually creating this body of experience and work that's obviously going to stand you in great stead for kind of the next journey in your career. The kind of, you're talking about kind of shows and photographs, and obviously just now in 2024, 2025, we know the sort of framework of how hairdressing is seen in the world now, but it wasn't very much that it was either the competition-based stuff and print? Was there as many kind of hair shows and things like that, or how did it kind of manifest itself?
Well, I remember when I was with Irvin Rusk, he did a roadshow all around Scotland. Right, for hairdressers. I mean, it was, you know, so he had his show models, he had models that they were cutting on stage, and they were going to packed audiences. I mean, it was really quite rock and roll. And also he decided to do this huge show in the Theatre Royal.
Yeah.
And he got all the press up from London, and of course he had to fill the Theatre Royal, so everybody's mothers and grannies and everybody else came along. But it was the ambition of it. So for me growing up, I mean, I was very young then, and I just thought that was normal. I'm like, all right, this is...
everything's possible if that's the case.
Everything's possible because that's in my normality, I feel like.
And did print... It's weird now, because obviously, I mean, I'm a child of the sort of print media, and I've got my 3 favourite magazines that come to the salon, and I pore over them, and I've been in 2 of the 3. As a brand, we're all over all 3, but I've never quite made it to the 3rd one, but one of these days, hopefully. And that's always been a kind of burning ambition to, you know, see my name printed in these things. And obviously it's different now with obviously the internet, and you can showcase yourself in any way you want. Was that still as strong then?
Oh yeah, I mean the Hairdressers Journal was a weekly publication, and everybody couldn't wait to get the journal every week. You know, pour through it, see what was in it.
And again, as well, that thing you were saying about sitting trying to figure out how they did it, you know, is fascinating as well. And would that just be a kind of after work thing and get a model and try and figure it out, or just trial and error?
Trial and error.
Yeah, it's fascinating because obviously, you know, I know the end story to all of this, but the idea that you're sitting there and going, wonder how they got that wave at the front of that, or how they cut that thing. And then obviously
it was all this basket weave stuff. You were like, oh my goodness, how on earth did they ever do that?
Yeah, and have the patience to do it in the first place. So you talked about kind of Libetta and Longaris and these kind of things. Did you have sort of hairdressing idols at that point in your career? Was there sort of stylists and hairdressers that you were looking up to?
Yeah, I mean, Sassoons and Sorby and Anthony, Tony and Guy, you know, they were they were like Irvin and Rita's peers, if you like. Yeah. But I suppose you were almost brainwashed that we were such fans of Irvin and Rita. Then, you know, that's who we looked to. They were our idols.
Yeah. And obviously, especially that period as well, you know, their outreach to the world was huge. So the idea of it being this Scottish success story, I think, was quite important as well, because I don't want to flag wave too much, but I think sometimes kind of people forget the lineage of some of the greatest hairdressers Britain's ever produced in hairdressing businesses that have ever been produced. And at some stage, there's either an angry Scotsman or an angry Scottish woman involved in all of it, which for me is, you know, I'm super proud of that. So at what point did you start thinking exit strategy from the situation you were in?
It wasn't because I was unhappy. It was just, you know, there was all this buzz in the the Glasgow hairdressing sort of jungle drums of Alan coming back and opening up this salon, and you know, it just seemed so different that. And what happened was we were out with friends, and by accident, when he was doing his opening, you know, it was like, oh well, he's doing this huge opening, and it was like, oh well, just come in and see it. So we ended up going in and seeing the salon.
Right, wow. Okay. He's always famous. It's interesting. This is the great thing when you get to talk to... I'm going to actually look at the camera for this one, because it's interesting when you get to talk to Linda about it, because it clarifies some of the things that Alan maybe just doesn't quite tell you the truth about, because he always talks about don't bother with openings, you know, just get the salon open and get the till open and start making money, you know, don't be giving people free champagne. But needless to say, he was doing it for, you know, Buchanan Street back then.
Well, he did it to get just the PR and get the journalists.
Well, of course, that's
And
a
then,
different world, wasn't it? I mean, it's upstairs, and he didn't have social media, or he didn't have an outlet. So,
and apparently the journalists that wrote up afterwards said, wrote up how fabulous it was, how big the salon was, and she said, one up in the middle of a recession, let's see how long it lasts,
Is that right? Is that what they put? And of course, this is for those that don't know, this is 1979, isn't it? So kind of you're just at the end of the kind of winters of discontent and all that kind of stuff. So Glasgow was still pretty black and white at that point, wasn't it? I mean, we kind of think about it now and we remember it now, but kind of Glasgow pre-1990, Glasgow Smiles Better City of Culture, before they jet washed the whole place, was still quite a, as much as it was an exciting and a vibrant place to be, sort of from a kind of creativity perspective or music scene or whatever, the buildings were still black and the roads were still kind of cobbled and a bit kind of scary, wasn't it? Not really? No. It was down the end where our chip shop was, that is for sure.
But that's maybe why Alan doesn't want any openings after that, when that put him off with that journalist. Applying her all the champagne.
Well, especially if that's what the press said to him, that's for sure. So,
but it was more it was almost like a Camelot ideal. It was like Alan's ideal was, we'll have all these art directors and well, this wasn't right at his opening, but this is what eventually evolved. He just wanted all these creative people, and he planned to do all these photographs, shows. Everybody could get involved. Everybody was equal in his sort of pack, if you like. And also, he was going to use all the best of products. So I'm not going to talk out of turn where I was before. But, products wasn't a priority, put it that way. Right. And also, it was hourly appointments and doing like foils and things like that. I mean, nobody else in Glasgow was foiling here. It was all capped highlights. So everything he was doing was really very different. Yeah.
And he'd said that the inspiration for that obviously was the idea of when it came to changing the name, but obviously he kind of looked into the kind of Galvin brothers and what they were doing with colour and taking that experience from them and bringing that to Glasgow. So obviously that was getting out to you guys and other brands. So from the timeline roughly of Alan opening Buchanan Street in 79 to you deciding, right, I'm going to come into this.
So that would have been 81.
Right. Okay, so it was still a couple of years after you'd seen it and thought that you just make sure it was going to stay open before you jump ship. Seemed like the sensible thing to do. And listening to the story, it was the correct thing to do, because kind of at the point that you...
Yeah, well, I just reckoned I couldn't go any further where I was,
Did it feel like a full stop at that point?
It felt like a full stop, that was it. I couldn't... It wasn't going to offer me any more, and at that point I thought, well, you know what, it was scary, because you do get very comfortable where you are.
And did it
taking that jump was quite risky.
And what was kind of the final straw? What was like, right, do you know what, I'm going to either pick up the phone or write a letter or go up the stairs, but this is what I'm going to do?
No, I think it was just a slow burn. It was just like, yeah.
Right. So on that note, that's kind of a nice natural end to the first part of the chat. Wasn't that scary, was it? It was okay. So we're going to stop just now, and we're going to give you a bit of a break, and then we'll come back to part two.